Welcome to Artistic Adventures. We're going to continue with our Harajuku project by turning one of my monster high dolls into a Harajuku girl. This video is going to be focused on making the dress. Let's get started. This is the doll from the last video, the Dracula doll that we did a face up on. And we're going to make the dress for her. First of all, for the skirt portion, I'm using a piece of white t-shirt material and I kept the hem, making it come down about mid-thigh. And then I'm going to take these pieces of organza in pink, purple, and blue. And I'm using the salvage edge on the bottom so I don't have to hem it. You know, I don't like to do all that hemming. Now I'm measuring the three pieces so that they will overlap in proportion and then marking where each one should be sewed onto the material. And once I've done that, I'm cutting another piece of t-shirt material out of a light blue t-shirt, and that's going to be the top. Now I'm taking a piece of satin that I'm going to use for the sleeves, and I'm ironing a folded up edge on it because I want to use the folded edge part for the bottom of the sleeve so I don't have to hem it again. And then I'm going to glue the part that folds over at the top, and that will be the portion that I gather for the top of the sleeve. And I'm going to do that on two sides, one for each sleeve, and set that aside to dry. I'm taking my piece of organza and I'm going to put a running, very long broad stitch in here, a gathering stitch, so I can ruffle it. So run that through my little baby sewing machine and then start pulling one of the threads. I pull from each end so I don't break the thread and get a nice ruffle on that. And then I measure it to make sure I've got it gathered enough to fit the skirt. And based on where I marked it for the bottom layer, I'm going to sew now I shortened the stitch on my sewing machine and I'm going to sew top over this to attach it to that white underskirt. Okay, and I used about, I think it was about two feet probably of the tulle before I gathered it, just to give you an idea. I don't have a pattern for these things I do. I just sort of see it in my head, and based on my years of experience with sewing, I just kind of know, you know, how big to make it. So that's kind of how I work. Sorry, I don't have patterns for this stuff. All right, so now we've done the blue portion and we've gathered it, and we're going to sew it down where we marked the second tier to go on this white material. Okay, and I'm not going all the way to the edges because I'm going to have to sew the back of that white t-shirt material up for the back seam. All right, this is the last ruffle. It's pink, and you can use any colors you want. The thing about the Harajuku area is they love to use lots of vibrant, bright colors, a lot of pastel colors. So anything you want to use here is fine. All right, now I'm sewing down that last layer, and it is probably 1/2 inch from the top because we're going to turn the top portion of that white material down for an elastic waist. All right, and there's the finished ruffled skirt. So now, while I've got my sewing machine out, I'm going to go ahead and turn the seam down on that top part to finish off the top so I don't have to pull the sewing machine out later, and set that aside. So now we're going to take the skirt, and the thing that you want to do when you're using elastic waist is just to make sure that you've got enough of an opening there for it to fit over her hips. That's the widest part of her body. So if you do, then you should be able to have an elastic waist that you can pull on and off the doll. I'm taking a small piece of thin elastic and I'm making it a loose fit for her waist, not tight. And then I'm going to sew the two ends overlap together. So I've got a circle, and that will be the waistband. It doesn't have to be very tight on her because you've got a lot of material in the skirt too to account for. All right, now is how I'm going to sew the back seam together. I didn't want to try to do it on my sewing machine because there's so much bulk in there. I'm just basically lining up, you're going to turn it with the right sides together so the ruffles are all on the inside. And then I'm just sewing a stitch up the back, probably a 1/8 to a 1/4 of an inch seam by hand, just because I don't think it would really work well to do it on my sewing machine. I use that little sewing machine for my crafts, and it's it's good for straight seams and things like that. But when you get too challenging, it's not very happy and it'll quit on me. But otherwise, it's really done a good job and lasted a pretty long time and doesn't make the thread get all knotted up and things like my bigger sewing machine does actually. All right, so we've just about finished this seam all the way up to the top. And once we get up there, we're going to tie it off and knot it a few times to make sure that it's going to hold, because that's the part that's going to be stretching around the waist once we put the elastic in it, and we want to make sure it's nice and tight. All right, so I put about 3 knots in there, I guess, and then clipped it. And now we're going to turn it. Oh, I'm sorry, not yet. Now we're going to put the elastic on. We're still going to keep it inside out. And this was a little trick I showed you when we made the leggings. If you get a bottle that's about the same size as the top of that skirt, then put the elastic on, and you can pull a little bit of the fabric up and then fold it over, and then you can make a seam to encase the elastic, and that'll make your waistband. You need to stretch the fabric when you're making elastic waist, because if you didn't stretch it, the thread and made the thread the size of the waist with the elastic tight, then when you try to stretch it and put it on the doll, the thread would break. So this way we're sewing it with the waist fully expanded, so the thread is at its maximum circumference here, and that way when you take it off, it'll shrink down, but it'll still be tight. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to explain this, but I'm not sure I'm coming across right. But anyway, I hope just from watching it, you can see what we're doing here. Now, when we take it off, then it goes to the size of the elastic and gathers the waist, and we've got a nice little gathered waist there. All right, so now let's slip it on the doll. And there's our little, you could also use this for a tutu. I sort of like the look after I made it, and maybe we'll do a ballerina project next. What do you think? Let me know if you'd like to see that in the comments below. Ballerina doll project. Yeah, that would be cool. All right, so now I'm taking that top part of the blue t-shirt material, or it's sort of a teal, I guess, bluish green, seafoam green, and I'm just folding the back part over, and then I'm going to sew the seam together in the back. Now, if you wanted to make this removable, you could just put little strips of Velcro on that and sew it to it. Me, I don't really care that much about taking the costumes off the dolls. I'm doing this more as a form of art. So for this piece, I just sewed it on her. All right, so basically a little tube top. Now we're going to use that satin material that we glued down earlier to make some cute ruffled sleeves. I'll show you how to do that. So now we're just going to cut off the area there right at the top before we glued the two ends together. And then I'm going to take needle and thread and run a very loose stitch, gathering stitch, up the side that was glued, and then we'll gather that, and that's going to make our little gathered sleeve. And once you get it to the right size, gather it as much as you need to go around her arm. Then you're going to tie it off so that the gather doesn't come out. Now, at the ends that were left unfinished, I'm just putting a little glue on them so they won't fray, and then we'll be sewing those down later. So I set those aside to dry while we put a little trim on this bodice. So I have this little tiny trim that I found. So cute, or kawaii, right? So I put glue on the back of it. I used E6000, and then I glued some around both the top and the bottom of the shirt to add a little trim to this top. And we're going to do some more things later, but one step at a time. All right, so now we've got that part done, and I've let the glue dry just a little bit. We're going to put the sleeves on. So we wrap the sleeves around the arms, and first we're going to sew the seams together underneath the arm See that? Sew that together right there. And then you're going to tack it down to the t-shirt top underneath. And then that they're going to be sort of a little loose sleeve that can either be worn up or it can fall down and be off the shoulder. Either way. Um, Depends on how you want it to look. So sew that little seam up, and then once you do, you can just start catching up some of the material of the top from underneath and tack it down, tack the sleeve down. And there's one sleeve done. So we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. The whole time I'm doing this, I actually am trying to be very careful not to touch her face. I know that seems like, oh my God, we're going to mess up her face after we did all that work on it. But I am really trying to be careful not to touch it. I was going to cover it up, but I decided I would just leave it open and just try to be really careful. Hopefully, I won't be putting any water on it or spilling paint on it or anything horrible like that. All right, so there's our little dress. And there's still lots of more things I want to do to this. I want to put a belt. I'm going to put some jewelry and some other embellishments, but we're going to do that a little bit later on in this project. We still have to do some more things. We're going to make her some little thigh-high hose and some cute shoes, and of course a great wig. Then we'll do some finishing touches and we'll have our final Harajuku girl. So I hope you liked this video. Please give me a thumbs up if you did. And remember, we have lots more coming up. As always, please subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Thanks and bye.